My name's Wade, and this is the third video in this series. Now, for those who haven't watched the previous video, I'm documenting my 2025 quest to hit a 500 kilo competition powerlifting total in the IPF. I compete in either the sub 93 or sub 105 weight class, and I'm 62 years old, making me a Masters 3 lifter competing against other 60 to 70 year olds. And for Americans, that 500 kilos equates to around 1,100 pounds. Now, the approach I'm using to get to 500 kilos is to apply the idea of marginal gains and use it to identify areas where I think I can make necessary improvements to get to 500 and go beyond. If we're looking for marginal gains to improve our numbers, an obvious area where we can find them is by surrounding ourselves with the right people to help and find the shortest route from setting goals to achieving them. So I want to consider support networks for lifters. Now, you can head off into the Russian backwoods to train like Rocky, but even Rocky took his coach with him. And the obvious question is, do you need a coach? And are there additional people who can also help you, who might be the difference between you walking away with the pride of having achieved your goals or a ton of regrets? In the search for marginal gains, those people who have already bought into the idea will already have looked at their situation and stated, I am going to be a champion. Who will help me to get to that point in the shortest time? And, well, you could do it all yourself and read all the books and learn by trial and error, and that's been my way, simply because before I started powerlifting, I was a distance runner for years. And although I've lifted since I was about 14, I came into powerlifting as a Masters powerlifter, only competing for the first time at the age of 57. And by that point, I'd read extensively and decided to do the PT and coaching qualifications to add to that knowledge and to get certified. Now, even with a coach, there still has to be some trial and error, because what works for one person doesn't always work for everybody. But the thing is that if you don't fancy following my path, the knowledge is already out there with some great coaches, and it makes obvious sense to tap into that knowledge, especially if you're young or you want to avoid the trial and error of the DIY route. Now, if you're a footballer, such as Cristiano Ronaldo, you'll have a personal chef, a nutritionist, fitness coach, physio, doctor, personal assistant, sponsors, accountants, lawyers, drivers, and psychologists. Now, none of us are in the same income bracket to be able to afford that as amateur athletes, but having a few of these, such as a coach or a competition handler, training partners and a driver, while not essential, wouldn't be a bad thing for most lifters. Now, the problem for most of us is a lack of money to pay for all this, and for some of us, the other problem is a degree of control freakery. Now, I'm saving up for retirement, and I also have an abundance of the control freakery, which means I like to be in control of what I do. So your chosen pit crew will almost certainly differ from mine. So for starters, who can help us be the best powerlifter we can be? And let me know in the comments if I've missed anyone. Now, the answer may just be you. You do not need a fancy entourage, but in reality, unless you have a PhD in sports science and a crazy drive that means you absolutely won't slack in training, then the chances are that you are going to need your version of a pit crew. So if money was no concern, who would you hire? Now, on screen in no particular order is my list, and I'll discuss my approach to each of these. Let's start with a driver and personal assistant. Now, if you're young enough, that will typically be mum and dad, someone to get you to a meet, deal with fighting off the autograph hunters, answering the fan mail, holding back the groupies, and sorting out all of the stuff that's outside of picking up weights and putting them down again. That's really useful. If you're serious on game day, any effort outside of lifting on the platform and other distractions should be minimized. I've driven to a bench-only meet that was hours away on the day, knowing I had no chance of winning, and I was not too worried about the result. But if meet day is going to be any distance away, a driver and a bag carrier are worth their weight in gold. Now, in the real world, most of us can't afford a full-time personal assistant, but on meet day, simply having someone to drive us and carry our bags, deal with the admin, the timing of warm-ups and loading our weights, and allowing us just to lift is a godsend. Even if they're not a coach, and even if their input is limited to driving, bag carrying and loading weights for you. Now, fellow lifters can do this, and meet volunteers will often help, and there are plenty of people who will willingly act as handlers if you simply offer to return the favour. Now, you can obviously do all this yourself, But as I found out at Commonwealth Championships, where the competition becomes about final attempt selections and playing attempt selection poker with the opposition for medals, even a control freak like me needs a competition day handler, even if it's only just to do the maths. On a more serious note, if you can find a driver on meet day, get one and get there early. Meets are stressful, and being organised and fresh absolutely helps to avoid adding to that stress. If you have a coach, they can act as a handler, but make sure that job is included in your contract with them from the outset and agree to cover their expenses. Now, you should also be aware that in the IPF, you now need to be an accredited handler or coach to go backstage at a national meet. So make sure that that's all in place before you turn up at nationals. Next on the list, in no order, I've got sports psychologists. They tend not to come cheap, and so unless you are rolling in money, know someone, or really feel that you can benefit from working with one, it's a case of reading articles and books or getting that mental input from your coach. Now, they may or may not have the understanding of the science of psychology, but it helps to have someone who is a great motivator or who knows how to relax you if that's your problem. Now, my go-to writers are Dave Aldred, Steve Peters, Charlie Unwin and Lanny Bassam. Not only are these psychologists and writers, they're people who've competed at top level or who have worked with the best athletes. Again, the idea of marginal gains is to find those who've been there and done it, and who also understand the science in this case. Now, ideally you would want to work with someone who was a powerlifter and a sports psychologist, but that isn't essential. Getting into the zone, as it's known, where you're mentally attuned for competition, learning relaxation techniques and other psychological techniques translates very well between sports, because it's ultimately about translating the training you have done into a game day performance, whether you're a powerlifter, snooker player, boxer, darts player, whatever. The psychological ideas are the same, only the excitement and arousal levels that you're required to find for each sport are different. Now, you might want to channel focus, rage, anger into a deadlift, but that isn't the place you want to be between lifts, and it certainly isn't where your head needs to be if you're about to pot a black to win a snooker match. Now, next on the list is a coach. Appointing a coach is a big deal. Again, the choice needs to be one that finds the person with the best reputation and, more importantly, the best results for you. It's also a case of finding someone you can work with, because certain personalities just don't work well. And there has to be trust between athlete and coach, and that trust needs to apply both ways. And the same trust requirements apply with a nutritionist, physio and doctor. Now, with coaches, it's also important to find someone who hasn't spread themselves too thinly. It's great to have the best coach, but if they've got 400 clients, realistically, how much of their time are you going to get, especially if you want a world beater? How interested in you are they likely to be? Now, this should give you the same focus as all the other paying clients, but your impending district meet as a masters lifter obviously isn't the same as someone coaching a potential champion at seniors at Worlds. Now, the best are also going to charge you more. Newer coaches are cheaper and keener to make an impression and build a reputation, and they may be the better choice for those starting out. They may be very good because you really get on well with them and work together as a team, and because they're new doesn't necessarily mean they don't know this stuff. Now, a good coach will also know when it's right to refer you to someone else to progress, especially if they really are the best, because knowing your limitations as a coach matters. It shouldn't be simply about how much money they can make from you. Now, moving on to doctors and physios, they go through the same training and should all be the same. However, if you lift, finding one who also lifts makes sense. Their go-to response will not be to tell you to give up lifting when you turn up at their door injured, and they certainly won't automatically tell you not to compete when you turn up injured a week from a competition. Now, I have a specific physio I've used, and he lifts and coaches. Believe me, that does make a difference. Now, I can't afford a private doctor and generally try to avoid them unless I'm seriously ill, but if I was paying, this would be something I would factor in. Now, in my case, I've toyed with the idea of hiring a coach, and if I'm being honest, I think that this would be the greatest driver of progress for me. However, cost is an issue, given that I'm saving up to retire from the day job. And as a qualified coach and control freak, I think it would probably be the fact that I'd spend too much time arguing with him if I chose the wrong one. Although if I could afford it, it would be beneficial to find someone who I could bounce ideas off. Now, most importantly, I love the programming side of things, and I'd be very loath to hand that over, especially as That side is really working well for me at the moment, which is kind of proof that what I'm doing has something going for it. As for a nutritionist, the issue I have is not that I don't know what to eat. My issue is actually dealing with the psychology of refusing chocolate and sports drinks. Again, this area is like programming. I want to learn more about it, although I want to do that through practice and to take control over it. So I'll be doing that myself. Now, for me, part of the satisfaction of seeing my numbers go up is knowing that it was my program and my peaking efforts that made it possible. If I fail, it's all on me. Now, your approach is likely to be different if you aren't coming from a coaching background, or if you just want to lift things and have a coach do all that other stuff for you, which does make things easier. So consider the need for a nutritionist and for a coach if you can afford it. Although a nutritionist won't prepare your food, they will take the guesswork away, and you just need to follow the plan, which it's going to remove a lot of stress and a lot of guesswork. Now, having a personal chef for most powerlifters is a pipe dream. There isn't the money for it, but if you want to be the best and money's no object, hey, it's an option. And if you can afford to have your meals pre-prepped and delivered, there are companies out there that will provide such a service. If you can afford to go down that route and think it's worth the effort. Masseurs. This is an interesting one. The benefits of regular massage are open to question, although the relaxation and stress release alone may be worth it to you, and most professional sports teams use them, which suggests they're worth it. Again, I'm not in a position to go shelling out money for a regular massage, but if somebody wants to provide me with a course for free in Nottingham, and that convinces me it's worth my money and time, especially after a competition when I'm typically struggling to walk for a week, then hit me up and I'll happily promote your service as if it works. As I said, the idea of marginal gains is that if it works and gives you the edge, do it. If it doesn't, then forget it. What about meet day handlers? Now, your coach can act as a meet day handler if it's in the contract you agreed with them, or you can do it yourself. And this is one area where simply having someone to load your warm-up weights, carry your bag, hand in your attempts slips between lifts and drive you to the event is well worth it. If you get to the point where the competition turns into a real competition with attempt selection becoming an issue, you need a handler, and one who is familiar with the ins and outs of doing the job properly. At the Commonwealth Championships in South Africa, I was in a battle for medals, with attempt selections changing every couple of minutes. Monitoring scoreboards and figuring out the weight to choose to optimise your position is for your handler. If all you have to do is lift, that's easy. If you're changing final attempts and doing mathematics to win or place, that's distracting. And it can get very complicated, with the timings of attempt selections and warm-ups as well as the amounts submitted being important. You can get your head in a mess. Now, there are certain people you can pay just to be a meet day handler, but whether you are prepared to go down that route depends upon where you are in the world standings and what sort of competition you're involved in. Now, I normally handle myself at meets, but for British Masters this time, I may see if I can find a mug dumb enough to put up with me and offer them the same service in return. The final pit crew member I've listed is a training partner or partners. Training partners are an interesting thing. Having someone to push you and to drive you in training, and someone's going to make you turn up and give you your best every time you train, is great. But they have to be the right people. If you fall into the trap of doing someone else's training sessions, or training becomes about larking about rather than being a challenge, or the opposite happens where every session becomes a brutal competition and beatdown with your training partners, that can be great or maybe not. Now, I train in my garage and I can't train regularly at fixed times. I also have the mentality to drive each session without the need for training partners. But most people, you need training partners. They're a godsend, but you need to choose them carefully. Now, before powerlifting, I used to run with a running club. They had a fast group, a slow group and an intermediate group. Now, the slow group were just fun runners and they were a bit too slow for me. The intermediate group were more serious and decent club runners, running for fitness with the odd aspirational individual targeting training with the fast crew and hitting some decent times in races. The fast group were in some cases chasing international Olympic dreams, and I made the mistake of training with the fast crew a couple of times and left races behind, just trying to live with them in training. So choosing training partners is a big deal because you have to think about what is going to optimize your training and not theirs. And as I learned probably too late in life after a serious knee injury, my genes were built to be reasonably strong and not designed to produce feats of incredible running endurance. Okay, so we've addressed the people we need in our corner. Next, we'll look at programming our training. Hopefully you're enjoying these videos and gaining something from them, but as ever, do the like and subscribe thing and drop a comment. I'll see you in the next video, and for coaching inquiries you can hit me up in the email address on the screen now.